There are certain hidden secrets in the universe that seem unreachable to the human mind. Some of these secrets are so dangerous that, once discovered, they can not only destroy the sanity of those who seek them but also distort reality itself. Among these forbidden mysteries, few are as disturbing as the legend of Hastur, the King in Yellow. He is not just a figure forgotten in the shadows of cosmic horror but the center of a mythology that has haunted human understanding for centuries. His influence stretches from the cursed play, The King in Yellow, through the ruins of the city of Carcosa, to the depths of the minds of those who dare to explore his secrets. But, after all, what is so terrifying about the legend of Hastur that the mere attempt to understand it leads to madness? The legend of Hastur, the King in Yellow, dates back to the pages of 19th century literature, but his sinister presence seems much older, as though his roots are entwined with something ancient, beyond human understanding. It all began with Ambrose Bierce, author of the work An Inhabitant of Carcosa, published in 1886. In this enigmatic tale, Bierce describes the city of Carcosa, a place shrouded in mystery, where time and space bend in ways that defy logic. The protagonist, wandering through a desolate land, among tombs and dead trees, eventually realizes that he is dead and that Carcosa is his final destination. Although Hastur is not mentioned directly in this narrative, Carcosa became the first crucial element of his myth. The city is described as a place of decay, where reality itself seems fragile and death is omnipresent. Carcosa, as a concept, emerges as a city that exists on the edge of reality, a distorted reflection of something that was once glorious but is now lost in time and space. This concept is only the beginning of the connection between Hastur and the collapse of human sanity. The next step in the development of this legend came with Robert W. Chambers in 1895, with his collection of short stories The King in Yellow. In his work, Chambers expanded the idea of Carcosa, directly connecting it to the figure of Hastur and the eponymous play. The cursed play The King in Yellow has the power to drive anyone who dares to read or watch it insane. Simply coming into contact with its words destroys the minds of its readers, corroding their grasp on reality. At this point, Hastur is no longer just a distant name but a present and destructive force, acting through subtle and insidious means. Chambers brings Hastur to life not as a physical creature, but as an idea, a concept that corrupts and devours the mind. Carcosa and the King in Yellow serve as portals, connecting the minds of the characters to a reality beyond what the human mind can bear. But what is the purpose of this destructive power? Does Hastur seek only madness, or is there something deeper in his influence? This question remains open, fueling the terror surrounding his name. Carcosa, in Chambers' work, goes beyond being a ruined city. It represents the inevitable decline of anything that strives for perfection. The splendor of Carcosa, now lost and covered in decay, is a metaphor for human ambition and the final fate of all civilizations. What is built in glory is always on the brink of ruin, and Carcosa is the reflection of that inevitable end. Death and despair are central themes not only in Bierce's work but also in Chambers, and throughout Hastur's mythology, these themes are explored with depth and subtlety. But how does Chambers link this lost city to the mental terror of the King in Yellow? The play, described in fragmented details, has a first act that appears harmless. However, the second act contains such terrible secrets that anyone who reads it is consumed by madness. Here, we can see a parallel with the human quest for knowledge, the desire to uncover mysteries, even when the consequences may be devastating. What drives us to seek what we know to be dangerous? Is it the need for control or a fatal curiosity? Chambers explores the thin line between sanity and madness. The characters who read The King in Yellow begin to lose control of their minds as the play slowly erodes their perception of reality. But what is more terrifying? The sudden mental collapse or the slow disintegration of sanity? For many, the answer lies in the fear of the unknown, in losing control over one's own thoughts. Hastur's influence, which begins as a whisper in the words of the play, intensifies, turning the lives of its readers into an endless nightmare. The city of Carcosa, shrouded in mystery, and The King in Yellow, with its promise of mental destruction, are two sides of the same coin. Both reflect the corruption of the mind, the breakdown of reality, and the power that Hastur exerts over what is tangible and what is imaginary. But is this influence limited only to madness? The relationship between Hastur and Carcosa is a reflection of the fragility of human existence. Carcosa is a city, yes, but it is also a mental state, a representation of the internal collapse that occurs when someone confronts the incomprehensible. Death in Carcosa is inevitable, but the true death is not physical. It is the death of sanity. When someone crosses Hastur's threshold, what remains is not just a lifeless body but a shattered, unrecognizable mind. The most terrifying thing of all may be the idea that, once someone sees Carcosa or is touched by the play The King in Yellow, there is no turning back. What has been seen or understood cannot be undone. And thus, the origin of Hastur presents us not only with the horror of madness, but with the horror of irreversibility. Once someone knows Hastur, his mark is eternal. The play The King in Yellow became the dark heart of Hastur's legend, a literary artifact so powerful that it corrupts and destroys the mind of anyone who dares to read or watch it. But what makes this play so feared? What is so devastating about its words that leads to irreversible madness? Chambers provides only fragments of the play's content, allowing the reader to fill in the gaps with their own deepest fears. Perhaps this is the secret of its power. The play acts like a mirror, reflecting the most intimate weaknesses of those who read it. Unlike other forms of horror that operate through brute force or immediate shock, The King in Yellow exerts its influence in a subtle, almost insidious way. The play begins innocently, not immediately revealing the darkness it carries. Characters involved with it report that the first act seems to be merely an innocuous drama, with no hint of the horrors to come. However, it is in the second act that the true nature of the play is revealed, and at this point, the minds of the readers begin to unravel. Here, the terror does not strike all at once. It grows slowly, infiltrating the psyche, gradually disintegrating the notion of reality. This gradual transition between the real and the unreal is one of the most disturbing aspects of Chambers' work. The characters who read or watch the play begin to notice small changes around them. At first, they are subtle details, shadows that seem longer than they should be, figures glimpsed where no one should be, or a sensation that time is slowing down. These small distortions in perception are merely a prelude to something far more devastating. The play seeps into the minds of its victims, and rather than causing an immediate breakdown, it slowly poisons their sanity, like a venom that takes time to act. This process of mental deterioration raises profound questions about the nature of reality itself. Is the world we perceive around us truly solid? And if it is not, what prevents us from falling into total chaos? The King in Yellow forces us to confront the fragility of our perception. The human mind, no matter how strong, is vulnerable to manipulation. And by introducing this doubt into the minds of its readers, the play becomes a deadly trap. After all, what happens when we can no longer trust our own senses? The play does not destroy its readers suddenly. It traps them in a cycle of uncertainties. As reality begins to warp, the characters desperately try to cling to logic and reason. But the more they try, the deeper their minds are pulled into the abyss. The horror of The King in Yellow lies precisely in this. It does not allow for an easy escape. With every attempt to understand what is happening, the mind sinks deeper into madness. Is it possible to escape this fate? Or is the very act of trying to resist what condemns the victims? The theme of resisting madness is central to many of the stories involving The King in Yellow. The characters know they are losing control, yet they continue trying to fight against it, as if madness were something that could be battled with sheer willpower. However, the play makes it clear that this is a futile effort. The madness it imposes is not something that can be reversed or avoided. It is an inevitable destiny for anyone who approaches its secrets. The more the characters try to save themselves, the deeper the hole they fall into. This concept is terrifying because it reflects a disturbing truth about the human condition. All of us, at some point, have experienced moments of doubt about reality. And what if, like in The King in Yellow, those doubts became inescapable? The play not only explores the fear of madness, but also the anguish of helplessness. No matter how much its readers try to flee or resist, they are doomed to succumb. This leads us to question: is there anything we can do to escape the mental corruption imposed by forces beyond our comprehension? The corrupting power of the play goes beyond destroying sanity. It also destroys identity. Those who come into contact with it slowly lose not only their understanding of reality but also their sense of who they are. They begin to forget parts of themselves, their memories fragment, and their personalities become distorted. This process of disintegration of the self is one of the most terrifying aspects of the play because it is not just the mind being destroyed, it is the very soul. For those who read The King in Yellow, there is no redemption. The play acts as a mental prison from which there is no escape. It not only alters the perception of reality but also changes the very essence of being. The characters who succumb to its power do not merely lose control of their lives. They lose who they were, transforming into shadows of themselves, wandering aimlessly in a world they no longer recognize. This collapse of identity raises a grim question. Who are we if we can no longer trust our memories and perceptions? Throughout Chambers' narrative, we see the characters struggling against this loss of self. They desperately try to hold on to any trace of who they were before being touched by the play. But the power of the King in Yellow is inexorable. It consumes its victims, one by one, until nothing is left but an empty shell. And the most frightening part is that these characters do not die physically. They continue living, but as broken versions of themselves, with no hope of recovery. In the end, the play reveals the true terror of Hastur. He is not just a distant god or a cosmic force beyond human comprehension. He is an entity that destroys from the inside out, corroding sanity, identity, and finally, the soul. The King in Yellow is the means through which he exerts his power, and anyone who comes into contact with this play is doomed to fall under his influence. There is no escape, no cure, and no redemption. The King in Yellow is not merely a literary work. It serves as a channel, a portal to a much deeper and more terrifying truth, a forbidden reality where knowledge becomes a curse. Many of the characters who venture to read the play do so driven by an almost obsessive search for answers, hoping to find something beyond common understanding. But what drives them to follow this path, knowing it will destroy them? Perhaps the answer lies in humanity's desire for control and knowledge itself. Humans, by nature, possess an innate curiosity about the unknown. We are driven by the need to understand what lies beyond our perception. But the problem arises when this desire leads us to confront something beyond the capacity of our minds to endure. The King in Yellow masterfully explores this dilemma, presenting forbidden knowledge as something irresistible but also fatal. The characters want to know what is hidden in the words of the play, but each fragment of truth they uncover brings them one step closer to madness. How far are we willing to go in the name of knowledge? This concept of forbidden knowledge is deeply rooted in various cultures and mythological traditions. Throughout history, we find accounts of secrets so dangerous that the mere attempt to unravel them can lead to destruction. In The King in Yellow, this theme is central, with characters being drawn into a spiral of self-destruction as they attempt to uncover the mysteries of the play. But what do they truly hope to find at the end of this path? And more importantly, why do they continue, even knowing they are walking toward madness? As the characters delve deeper into the secrets of the play, they face a devastating dilemma. Curiosity compels them to move forward, but with every new discovery, their sanity erodes. The play then becomes a trap of knowledge. It offers fragments of wisdom, but these fragments are so vast and complex that the human mind cannot absorb them without paying a price. What The King in Yellow teaches us is that not all knowledge is meant to be understood by mortals. This dilemma lies at the heart of the play. Does knowledge truly liberate or destroy? For the characters, the search for understanding brings not clarity but the collapse of their own minds. Each secret revealed does not bring them closer to truth but drives them further from who they were. This is the true danger of forbidden knowledge. It not only erodes the mind but also the identity. Those who engage with The King in Yellow do not emerge from the experience the same. They are irreversibly transformed. The quest for answers leads the characters to confront what lies beyond our world. What they find is not a new level of comprehension but the abyss. And at the bottom of that abyss resides Hastur, a force that not only distorts reality but also destroys any sense of identity. Here, the play goes beyond being a mere catalyst for madness. It is a doorway to a truth the human mind cannot bear. When we confront something so vast and incomprehensible, we are consumed by the insignificance of who we are. This journey through forbidden knowledge reminds us of the myth of Icarus, who, by flying too close to the sun, ultimately fell. Just like Icarus, the characters in The King in Yellow approach something grand, something that promises answers to the mysteries of the universe. But, as in the myth, the price for this flight is a fall. The closer they get to the truth, the deeper they plunge into darkness. What began as a search for answers turns into a cycle of self-destruction. There is a bitter truth contained in this story. Not all knowledge is meant to be attained. The desire to know, which normally guides us, here becomes a destructive force. And once the first step is taken on this path, there is no turning back. The play infiltrates the minds of its victims, and escape becomes futile. Each new attempt to escape or resist the play's influence only deepens the sense of despair. The play then becomes not just a source of madness, but a trap that devours those who seek to understand it. This cycle of self-destruction becomes, in the end, a reflection on the limits of the human mind. The characters, in trying to understand the incomprehensible, lose themselves. They seek answers, but what they find is the collapse of their very existence. This leads us to a disturbing question. How far should we go in the pursuit of knowledge? Are there mysteries in the universe that are not meant for us? The terror of The King in Yellow lies precisely in this idea. It confronts us with the notion that not everything should be known. There are limits to what we can and should comprehend. The characters who venture into the play pay a terrible price for their curiosity. They lose their minds, their identities, and ultimately, their souls. They enter a cycle of madness that can never be broken, for the knowledge they have gained cannot be undone. In the end, the play presents us with a clear lesson. Knowledge does not always set us free. In many cases, it destroys us. What remains for the characters of The King in Yellow is an empty world, where their minds are shattered and their identities dissolved. They do not find the answers they sought. What they find is the price too high for crossing the boundaries of knowledge. As the characters delve into the mysteries of The King in Yellow, it is not only their sense of reality that begins to unravel. Their very identities become fragments of who they once were. The play doesn't merely corrupt sanity, it provokes the destruction of something even more intimate, the sense of self. Those who engage with the play start to lose control over their memories, their personal history, and even their emotions. But what does it mean to lose one's identity? And what remains of a person when they no longer know who they are? The loss of identity is one of the most profound and devastating effects The King in Yellow imposes on its readers and viewers. As the cosmic horror of Hastur infiltrates their minds, the characters experience a collapse of what they once defined as self. Important memories become vague or vanish entirely, and what was once a cohesive personality, shaped by life experiences, begins to disintegrate. This leads to a fundamental question. Who are we if our memories and perception of ourselves can be so easily destroyed? This process of identity disintegration occurs gradually, much like the loss of sanity. At first, the victims of The King in Yellow may not even realize what is happening. They might forget small details or struggle to recall significant moments in their lives. However, over time, this loss accelerates until there is no longer any distinction between what is real and what is the result of Hastur's influence. This is one of the play's most subtle horrors, the deconstruction of identity, without the victim realizing how far they've drifted from themselves until it's too late. If we consider human identity as a collection of memories, experiences, and interactions with the world, The King in Yellow attacks these foundations directly. It not only distorts external reality but also disrupts what lies within each person. The characters begin to question their own thoughts and memories, unable to trust their own minds. This type of rupture is, in many ways, a fate worse than death because what remains of a person without a sense of self? The loss of identity doesn't happen abruptly, but rather as a slow and inexorable collapse. At first, the characters may try to fight it, clinging desperately to who they were before being touched by the play. But The King in Yellow is relentless. Every attempt to resist is like struggling against a powerful current. The more they fight, the faster they are dragged into the depths. Here, Chambers makes us reflect on the fragility of the human self and the overwhelming power of cosmic forces beyond comprehension. The terror of this loss of identity is closely tied to the breakdown of reality. Without a reliable external world, the characters' minds become adrift, with no anchor points to hold onto. The play drags them into a state where the distinction between the real and the imaginary disappears, and without those clear boundaries, individuality dissolves. The mind, in trying to understand what is happening, confronts something much larger and more chaotic than it can bear. At this point, identity shatters, like a mirror reflecting a distorted and fragmented image. The city of Carcosa, with its desolate and warped landscapes, is the perfect reflection of this loss of self. Carcosa is not just a physical place, it is also a mental state. Once a character enters the city or is touched by the play, there is no return. Carcosa is the symbol of all that has been lost, a city that was once glorious, but is now in ruins, just like the minds of those who try to comprehend Hastur. When someone finds themselves in Carcosa, sanity has already been lost, and identity follows, slowly crumbling under the weight of the unknown. The collapse of identity also makes us think about the very essence of being. If our memories and perceptions can be corrupted and destroyed, what is left of us as individuals? This is one of the most unsettling questions the King in Yellow forces us to face. Chambers suggests that human identity is fragile and easily manipulated, and that when confronted with cosmic forces like Hastur, it inevitably dissolves. And if that fragility is an intrinsic part of our existence, is simply seeking truths beyond our comprehension enough to unravel us? In Chambers' stories, we see the characters struggling against this loss. They try, at all costs, to maintain control over who they are. However, this battle against Hastur and against the collapse of identity is futile. The more they try to hold onto the cohesion of their personalities, the faster they are torn apart by the play. The King in Yellow does not allow resistance. It destroys not only the sense of reality but the sense of who the person was, until nothing remains but emptiness. This process is terrifying because it reflects a dark truth about humanity. Our identity is built on foundations that can be undone with ease. When we lose contact with the world around us, we also lose contact with who we are. And once this disconnection occurs, recovery is impossible. The characters in The King in Yellow become empty shells, without a clear identity, wandering in a world that no longer makes sense. In the end, the play presents us with a devastating vision of what it means to be human. It shows us that when faced with forces beyond our understanding, sanity and identity are the first victims. And just as Carcosa exists beyond time and space, the minds of those who come into contact with the play are trapped in a state of eternal disintegration. There is no salvation, no return to normalcy. Once identity dissolves, what remains is not a person, but a shadow of what they once were. Carcosa is more than just a ruined city in the myth of Hastur. It embodies a disturbing truth, that any pursuit of perfection, power, or knowledge is doomed to fail. Carcosa, with its decaying towers and dark landscapes, reflects the corruption not only of the environment but also of the mind and spirit. In the tales of The King in Yellow, the lost city emerges as a constant reminder that even what was once glorious will inevitably be consumed by time and chaos. The city is described as a place where the laws of time and space do not apply. Its streets and buildings seem to exist outside our reality, as if they float in a state of eternal decay. But what makes Carcosa truly terrifying is not just the fact that it lies in ruins, but what it symbolizes. As we explore Carcosa, we realize that it reflects the human condition, the effort to reach for something greater, only to discover that everything is fated to collapse. The very quest for greatness is what leads to ruin. Carcosa, like Hastur and the play The King in Yellow, represents a universal truth. Everything that is built, whether physically or mentally, will eventually crumble. In Carcosa, what was once majestic is now draped in decay. This is mirrored in those who dare to come into contact with Hastur. Just as the city is in a state of perpetual disintegration, the characters who seek the play or forbidden knowledge begin to fall apart. Their minds unravel, their identities are lost, and eventually, they become shadows of who they once were. The city also serves as a metaphor for what happens to those who dare to challenge the limits of the human mind. Carcosa is the final destination for those who attempt to uncover the hidden truths Hastur conceals. Those who reach Carcosa, physically or mentally, are doomed to wander its endless streets, with no hope of escape. The city is an eternal cycle of decay, where time has no meaning. It exists outside of reality, yet is deeply connected to the destruction of the human mind. The landscape of Carcosa, with its lake of Halley and crumbling towers, is a vision of what happens to any civilization, any mind, or any being that tries to defy cosmic laws. No matter how advanced or glorious a civilization once was, the inevitable end is always the same: ruin. Carcosa serves as a reminder that the ultimate fate of all creation is collapse. But what truly terrifies us is not just the physical destruction, but the sense that, like Carcosa, we are all heading toward a state of inevitable decay. Carcosa also reflects the minds of those who have been touched by the King in Yellow. Just as the city disintegrates, so too do the minds of the characters who engage with the play. They find themselves in a place where the rules of time and space no longer apply, and like the buildings of Carcosa, their sanity deteriorates. They are trapped in a cycle of madness, where collapse is inevitable. The city, then, is not just a setting, it is a mental state. When someone reaches Carcosa, their mind has already been destroyed. The Lake of Hali, one of the central points of Carcosa, is described as a vast expanse of dark waters, reflecting the decay around it. This lake is a powerful symbol. Its surface reflects not only the ruined city but also the internal corruption of those who approach Hastur. The lake, calm on the surface, hides unfathomable depths, suggesting that the true nature of Carcosa and of Hastur is beyond what we can comprehend. As the characters approach the lake, they feel the irresistible pull of its waters, just as they feel the compulsion to unravel the forbidden mysteries of the play. But why is Carcosa in ruins? What does it represent beyond decay and madness? The lost city reflects the human condition itself, our desire to reach beyond ourselves, only to discover that in the end, the quest leads to destruction. Carcosa may have once been a place of greatness and splendor. However, just like the minds of those who dare to challenge Hastur, it has been eroded by time and chaos. What remains is only a shadow, a distant echo of what it once was. And so, Carcosa reminds us that the pursuit of perfection or absolute power always ends in failure. The ruin of Carcosa is inevitable, just as the ruin of any civilization, mind, or being that tries to transcend its own limitations. The city is not only lost in time but also beyond the reach of redemption. Those who reach Carcosa are condemned to wander its streets, never finding peace or escape. Carcosa is the personification of the final destruction of everything that is built, whether physical or mental. It shows us that no matter how high our aspirations, everything is destined to decay. This inevitable ruin is not just a symbol of physical decay. It reflects the loss of control over one's own mind. Just as Carcosa is in constant collapse, those who come into contact with Hastur and the King in Yellow lose control over their sanity and identity. They are consumed by a force they cannot comprehend, and, like the city, they become trapped in an eternal cycle of disintegration. The decay of Carcosa is a reminder that in the end, we are all subject to the same forces of destruction. Carcosa, then, is not just a physical place. It is a state of being, a reflection of the condition of those who dare to seek forbidden knowledge. Just as the city's buildings collapse, so do the minds of those who venture beyond what is permitted. Carcosa is the final destination for those who surrender to the power of Hastur. And, like the city, once the mind begins to crumble, there is no return. All that remains is inevitable ruin. The journey through the mysteries of Hastur, the King in Yellow, and the city of Carcosa reveals not only the horror of madness but also the fragility of human existence itself. The pursuit of knowledge, so characteristic of our species, can be both a force for growth and a path to destruction. In Hastur's universe, we see how thin the line is between sanity and madness, the real and the imagined, and identity and complete dissolution. Those who dare to challenge these limits are drawn into a cycle of ruin, where there is no escape. Carcosa, lost in time and mind, reminds us that any attempt to reach the absolute, whether through knowledge or power, is doomed to failure. The city is a mirror of our ambitions and fears, reflecting that in the end, everything we build, our beliefs, our identity, and even our reality, can fall apart. But this story also challenges us to confront the unknown, leading us to ask, how far are we willing to go to discover the secrets the universe hides? If you're interested in exploring more about spirituality, I've specially selected some videos for you, packed with deep insights and fascinating discoveries that you'll love. Just click on one of them. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue this journey of self-discovery and spiritual learning. Your commitment to knowledge is the first step in transforming your reality.